Liz, for joining us today as we dig into this, what I would call extremely damning report, with the auditors noting several issues, including an inability to demonstrate value for money, and as you noted in your opening remarks, the need for much improvement. Mr. Tremblay, how long have you been in your role as the Deputy Minister for ECCC?
12 months.
12 months. And as the Deputy Minister, you are responsible for the government's day-to-day operations, including the budget and the development of programs. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you also, I think in your opening comments, reference that you are also responsible for the department's grants and contributions budget. That's correct?
Correct.
Yes. Okay, so according to the audit report we're discussing this morning, ECC's budget increased from approximately $1 billion in 2015-16 to $2.5 billion in 2023-24. And at that same time, funding for grants and contributions increased by $625 million. Can you tell the committee, was this increase in funding for grants and contributions directed by the minister at any time?
What do you mean by directed by minister? It comes from decision made by this government to develop new programs. If that's what you mean, yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. Did the minister ever check to see if the department had the capacity to administer the increased level of grants and contributions? Are you aware of any ministerial questioning or oversight to see if the department actually had the capacity to administer
the responsibility of the delivery of programs is within the department authorities, which means mine and the department itself. So it is through the Treasury Board submission, through the check and balance processes, that we actually assess the capacity of the departments.
So did the minister ever allocate more resources for the administering of these grants and contributions?
The resources are allocated by the government in general. There could be reallocation within the department sometime, depending on the needs. It's done under my authority more than the minister's authority.
Okay, thank you. So did the minister ever ask for updates about how the administration of these grants and contributions were going?
As we saw, the issue we're facing as a department is that this department is very decentralized, and it was like that before. You've got the people doing the weather and the meteo on one side. You've got the people doing protections of environment. You've got the people doing international. And they're not necessarily have been used to work together from a G&C perspective. And this is what we're facing. So we've got a lot of small programs in this department that have their own rules, that have their own processes, and achieve results. I cannot say that they're not achieving results, but it's not sufficient as a department. And that's why we call this audit. That's why we made some changes, because we want to make sure that the sum of our programs is more than the sum of our programs.
So then, I guess one of my questions would be, the announcement of this program and the creation of the bureaucracy to oversee it, was that at the minister's direction, or was this something that was determined by the deputy minister and other ADMs?
The way it works in the government is if you have a new initiatives and the programs, it is for the departments to assess how many public servants, full-time employees do you need to do that. It will go to the Treasury Board, and Treasury Board will assess if the demand is reasonable and makes sense. This process is done by the bureaucracy.
Was the minister ever involved in the approval of any projects? I believe I read in the report that he, together with yourself, were involved in at least half or 13 out of 29 projects that were spoken about in...
Yeah. It goes with the level of authorities in 99% of the time, which means that, for example, I would have authority up to $1 million, the minister would have above, and the ADMs and others would have lower. So it depends on the contribution agreements and depends on the project.
Right. Thank you for that. Was the minister made aware of the undertaking of this audit?
I've got bilats with the ministers, and I told him that G's and C's was a priority and that we needed to review. There was discussion with on a weekly basis with his staff. I don't know when they were made aware, but it is our responsibility to do internal audit when we assess that we need to do it.
Okay, thank you. Is there a plan for the department to reduce spending on grants and contributions until you have the capacity to provide proper oversight for the level of spending that has been undertaken?
The increase of funding that we got is really in some specific programs. Those programs are performing quite well. It's not necessarily that they're not producing results. My concern is more about the fact that we have 68 different initiatives under 14 different programs, activities, or programs authorities, and we need to have not necessarily one ring to rule them all, if I can use the expression, but having at least one framework to manage it all. And at the moment, that's not something that we have. But we take a risk-based approach on all the programs, and if we feel that we don't have the systems in place to auto-correct and to make sure that the spending is going in the right place, we will slow down for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the officials for being here. Looking through some of these grants, it's evident to me that there's quite a substantial number of entries for funding to American universities. And nobody could be confused based on the name. These are institutions like Cornell, Colorado State University, one in California receiving multiple grants, Clarkson, a private university in Potsdam. Why are we funding American universities to do climate change research?
We have to come back to you with, I can send you a document on this if you want a response. I don't have it in front of me.
But okay, I thought that's precisely why you were here, actually, was to provide an answer to the questions we had about grants and contributions at Environment Canada. This isn't just one niche grant we found. There are what appear to be at least a dozen entries to multiple different American universities. So it seems that as a matter of policy, you fund, or at least you don't exclude from funding, foreign academic institutions in a developed country that could be funding their own university research. And we obviously have world-class institutions here in Canada that could be doing this research. So abstracting from any individual grant at a level of policy, why is this government funding university research at American institutions when instead those resources could be supporting researchers and institutions here in Canada?
I need to look at it because it could be even Canadian researchers working in Cornell.
What's the policy, though? What's the policy on this?
There's partnerships on the research side with all countries and globally, and we work with all countries on this. They could be partnership with Cornwall.
Sorry, but
we have partnerships with the University of Calgary.
With great respect, I mean it's great to have partnerships, but this isn't an instance of us supporting Canadian institutions who are then partnering with other institutions. These are cases where, like I can see on your website, grants and contributions to academic institutions in the United States. Public and private academic institutions, some that have that are famous for having massive endowments, and typically, if it would be normal for in another developed country, at least, for those to be funded by the country in question. So I'm not satisfied by your answer, and I would hope that you could come back to the committee with more detail in writing. I'm not asking you to provide very specific details about an individual grant. I'm asking about the policy. Another question, how do you define if an organization is Indigenous for the purposes of identifying Indigenous organizations to receive funding? How do you verify claims that may be made about indigeneity?
We work with the First Nation and Inuit organizations at the national level. We also, so through the engagement process that we do have with them, that's the way we identify. For example, if you look at the...
Okay, sorry, can I just clarify that then? So if there's an organization on this list identified as, using the language of the website, an Aboriginal organization, would it be safe to assume that that organization is recognized as such by one of the major national representative bodies, or not necessarily?
I hope so. But I haven't checked for each of them because there's a lot of them.
Okay, I guess.
Normally, yes. But there is, as you know, also among this.
Sorry, normally yes, or like you either check or you don't check. So,
No, but
so if you don't check, then you hope so. If you do check, then normally yes.
You have to understand that even some national organizations have issues among them in terms of recognition. So I cannot talk about that.
Well, I understand that there are some marginal cases. The reason I ask is because we're doing a study at this committee on Indigenous procurement, and we've had national organizations, AFN in particular, that has come to this committee and told us that there are many groups on government lists who are accessing Indigenous procurement set-asides who are not Indigenous. Their estimate was that out of claimed 5% plus for Indigenous contracting, the number was closer to 1%. That was from the AFN. So do you think that proportion is likely true and would likely apply in the case of your grants?
It would likely apply here, but it's a concern for us, making sure that we work with the organizations who are recognized as First Nation, Inuit, and Métis organization. We have a Director General who's actually First Nation, who's managing the engagements with First Nation, Inuit, and Métis. And it is an area that we actually develop to make sure that we've got the right partnerships with the communities and the organizations.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sousa, please.
Thank you, Chair. And my question will be for Ms. Drainville. The departmental plan for fiscal year 23-24 shows you have a main estimates budgeted spend of $242 million, and this number could possibly be higher, closer to $300 million with subs and subs B for internal services for a department with a budgeted departmental spend of $876 million. So that's 28% on internal services, which is, in my estimation, way too inefficient and subsequently a waste of tax dollars. I do know internal services consists not only of just finance, but also HR, ATIP, communications, etc. With all that funding and FTEs, it is shocking that your internal controls, governance, and risk management are loose, risking taxpayers' monies. How many people do you have working in the finance function?
Very quickly, in finance per se, we are roughly 200 individuals.
200 individuals. And as CFO, how do you manage a grants and contributions program with what I will continue to call loose financial practices based on this audit, processes and internal controls around cash flow, claims reviews, use of advances, and on top of that, missing project files? That was also noted in the audit. Loose internal controls is a gateway to fraud and obfuscation. What is the scope of financial mismanagement and resultant risks that this committee should be made aware of?
Thank you for your question. I'll try to give you an answer that will address all your points. So we do have, like in my role as CFO, I do take very seriously the importance of sound management of public funds. So that's why my financial advisor, including myself, Marie-Claude, who is here today, we are looking into how we make sure that we have proper controls in place for oversight financial reporting. Not only internal controls work from a system perspective, but there's also all the governance that we have around that. We have all the training that was mentioned previously and all the check and balances we have. If we go back to the report has been very clear that there's inconsistency in the way we are doing things. They haven't said that the controls were ineffective, but they were saying that when they look for information, they could not find the informations. So the controls are being currently reviewed, as we mentioned previously, and we want to make sure that our approach is fostering one where people understand the role and responsibilities to training, and they use the tools and mechanisms at their availability, to take the proper actions in due time. So I have a great confidence that we have the right controls in place right now.
You've just said you have great confidence that you have the right controls in place right now. One of the 5 recommendations made in this audit is directed towards you as the CFO. The audit recommends that the CFO, in collaboration with program branches, should review, update as required, and communicate the departmental governance and oversight functions, accountabilities, roles, and responsibilities that enable an effective enterprise approach to G&C program delivery. So this is a recommendation within the audit. It's my understanding you've been the CFO for 3.5 years. Is that correct?
Correct.
And were you never made aware, or were you not aware of all of the inefficiencies in this area of grants and contributions? How could that be?
I was aware of inconsistencies in our system, not necessarily inefficiencies. Inconsistencies in the way we approach the management of G&Cs and how we document files. So that's different things, and that's what we've been doing, addressing
I will
those.
weigh in here, and I would say that inconsistencies, and I think it's stated in the report, can result in inefficiencies. So to try and separate those two things out, in my mind, doesn't make sense. If there are inconsistencies, and by the DM's testimony, when there are inconsistencies, when people are trying to access funding or understand a program, that results in inefficiencies. And so while you may not make that correlation, I think it's one that the auditors absolutely did. Thank you.
In the report, it indicated there were errors and inconsistencies that were found when the audit was completed. Can you please provide some examples of the errors and inconsistencies that were found?
Go ahead.
Yes, I can start, and my colleagues can beef up, but it went from lack of documentation, which we already mentioned, the way that the evaluation risk of each recipient is done at the beginning. We also have mandatory documents that needs to be filled out properly, where we realize that some were not necessarily filled out entirely. That needs to be added to the file. So it's all those observations that we realize that, it's kind of created like some inconsistency across the board. Mr. Trombley just answered some of the observation we have is like the training that comes with it. It's like people are like trying to do their job at the same time they manage G&Cs, but because sometimes they have other roles to play. And then it brings that inconsistency across the board on like making sure all documents are fulfilled properly.
It also indicated in the report that some project files were removed. Can you provide any information as to these project files that were removed, please?
Yes, I have not a specific answer for you on this one as why they would have been removed, but what we can realize is that the access to the shared drive where all the documents are kept are not necessarily protected with access. So internally, a lot of people would have access to the same files, so then people can go. And what we realize is that there's also a link to be done between different agreements. So sometimes the documents were there, but then they were moved to another agreements because they saw a link there from the program manager's perspective. So we are looking into restricting access. So when documents are filed on a folder, specific folder, that they are not moved anymore.
Yeah, thank you for that. Of course, we have concern about that in this committee relative to another study of ours, ArriveCAN, where a key character was found to have deleted thousands of files. So obviously it's very important that these restrictions are monitored and in place, or access is monitored and in place. So when I saw that, it reminded me of the situation with ArriveCAN that we have at this time. In 2019, the Treasury Board put forward their report, a horizontal review, where they found that there were many different problems with files at that time as well. Can you speak to any of the lessons from this 2019 report and if they have been implemented? Because it would seem to me that there was this Treasury Board report 5 years ago, yet things seem to be getting worse and not better. So perhaps would you like to comment on that?
I'm sorry. I know of a review that has been done by Treasury Board, but not on G's and C's, but mainly on asset fix.
It was a 2019 report indicated by Treasury Board, indicated by the recent Blacklock's article, if you'd like to go and perhaps reference that to sort of evaluate, because my point is there were recommendations. Things seem to have not improved, unfortunately. They've gotten worse. Given that, would you be open to and cooperate with an audit conducted by the Auditor General, perhaps to further evaluate beyond the 5.5% that this audit has had the opportunity to evaluate? Would you be open to a larger report completed by the Auditor General?
That's a very good question. We always welcome the Auditor General. There's no doubt about that. I think, though, that the work that we have been undertaking internally will definitely give us the result that we are looking for. So if there were to be any value in the Office of the Auditor General to come, it's maybe when we have done like the internal work first to add value on what we are currently doing.
So it seems then that this committee could benefit from a study done by the Auditor General to further evaluate these grants and contributions from ECCC.
But we did ask our internal audit to come with regular reports on the progress. Would be pleased to share them.
Thank you.
Wonderful. I think the committee would appreciate you sharing that with us. Mr. Kuzmirchuk, please go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing Ms. Soucy as well to attend our committee. I really do appreciate that. That was an important gesture.
Yes, please.
Kelly, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. To the witnesses again, is it appropriate in your view to have a grant go just to a named individual? Would that be something that we should be seeing, not to an organization, a business, but to simply have the recipient's name be a person's name? Is that something we would expect to see or not?
It may happen when it's an award, for example.
What do you mean by an award?
The person has been the ones developing a new initiatives and received funding for this.
Okay. I just one example. I won't name the individual because maybe there's a story here, but I would like to know more about this. There's a specific named individual who got $65,000, and the program purpose is listed as to increase the recipient's knowledge of wildlife on the subject lands and assess rangeland health as an indicator of habitat quality on the ranch and implement beneficial practice changes to further protect or enhance habitat for species at risk. Parts of that seem more credible than others, but in particular the fact that it starts with to increase the recipient's knowledge of wildlife on the subject lands. I mean, I can't imagine that there's anybody in the country who wouldn't want $65,000 to do that. So does that seem normal to you, or?
Maybe a lot of people would like to have it, but not necessarily qualified to have it. I don't think I would. That's not my areas of expertise. We can find the information for you.
Okay.
But when I was a PhD student, I received grants, so that was exactly the same circumstances where you receive money to continue your study or your work.
Okay.
So it could be a case like that. We need to come back to you.
Okay. It's just that for studies, in many cases, you have the recipients listed as universities. So you're telling me that the recipient could be an individual if that individual is doing research. But then you told me earlier that maybe the recipients being American universities is because there are researchers there who are Canadian.
Information on this. They're not the majority of our cases. They're really kind of unique and good for you to find them. But we'll have to come back to with written
Okay.
response.
I mean, I guess I would say in general that the purpose of this exercise should be that Canadians, not just parliamentarians who have privileged access to officials, but that Canadians can look on the on the website and know what's going on and who got the money. I wanted to come back to your comments about non-Canadian institutions and just give you one example I found. This is $65,000. It's given to Clarkson University, private university, Potsdam. And the program purpose is optimization and testing of a new passive dry deposition sampler. Is that not something that could have been done in Canada?
The researchers did the agreement. It's probably because it could not. There's areas where we're the top. There's areas where we partners with others, and they come with their own views and their own things. But I think we can send you an answer coming from the scientists. I won't talk on behalf of the scientists on the reasons for this.
Right. I'm not questioning that there might be scientific value. It's just the question of like what the role of the government of Canada is in funding research. I think most people would expect that would involve funding research in Canada, building up our Canadian institutions. It's not our role to be funding academic research in the United States, a country that can fund their own academic research.
You don't fund research in a country in isolation. You have to do it in partnership with institutions outside.
Right, of course, but this is I guess just a problem of accountability though, because I'm looking at the recipient name, right? Now, if there's a partnership between a Canadian and American institution, you would probably expect that the Canadian institution might be applying for funding in Canada, the American institution might be applying for funding in the United States, and those institutions are entering into a partnership using funding that they have together. But in this case, we have a situation where the program recipient is and this isn't an isolated case, right? We have many cases in here of this, and so I think there's just for the user of this information, trying to understand what your department is spending money on. There's ambiguity and uncertainty around what it actually means when a particular recipient is identified. So is this something you acknowledge the need to clean up so the public can actually understand what's going on?
We owe you more information. I recognize that.
Sunlight is the best disinfectant, right?
Thank you, Mr. Genuis.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just have a few more questions to finish our time with you today. My first question is, are the auditors who completed this audit from the Environmental Department? Are they from ECCC?
No, they're within the departments. But we're the most audited departments in the country.
Okay, so it was an internal audit. Okay, so maybe even then more beneficial perhaps to bring in the Auditor General to do a more external evaluation of the grants and contributions program. I'm just going to take a moment now and go back. I'd mentioned Rio Tinto in my first round of questioning, and it was brought to my attention that the chairman of Rio Tinto turns out to be Dominic Barton, an individual associated with another study we've completed here.
Funding is coming from another department.
Okay.
But please go ahead.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you. It's coming from your department.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate the clarification, but I was going to push back on that. Thank you for the clarification, Chair. So yes, it is coming from your department, $18 million from your department, in fact. Do you think that the Chair, Dominique Spartan's close relationship with the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister had anything to do with receiving the $18 million?
Enough.
Okay. My last question then would be, did any of this other funding of the billions of dollars, again, we have the amount for this 2022-2023 fiscal year, but we're awaiting the total amount since 2015. Did any of this funding go to any kind of government consultant?
On the G's and C's side, unlikely, because consultant will get contracts. So it would be procurement.
OK. Oui. Ça conclut mes questions, Monsieur le Président. Maintenant, je vais passer la parole.
I'll give my time to my colleague, Mr. Gonnet.
For 2.5 minutes, sir.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think it's important today for me to be here as critic for this issue and for official languages also, I'd like to table a motion as the Prime Minister, given that the Prime Minister has shown a lack of respect for French and Francophones by the interpreter notes that they were not provided with the motion, that the Governor General had to cancel some activities in Lévis, Quebec. For these reasons, that the committee communicate its profound disappointment that to the House and the Prime Minister that the